The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon, by Brad Stone. Introduction. Imagine, for a moment, a small bike shop in Glendale, Arizona. It's the kind of place you've seen 1,000 times, tires hanging from the ceiling, the faint smell of rubber and grease in the air. Behind the counter is an older man, friendly and kind, who has spent the last 30 years of his life fixing bikes. He loves his work. He's good at it. His name is Ted Jorgensen. One day in 2012, a visitor walks into his shop and starts asking questions about his past. About a brief, teenage marriage decades ago. About a young woman named Jacqueline, and a baby boy they named Jeffrey. The old man's face goes pale. He's carried this memory, this regret, for nearly 50 years. He'd lost track of them, didn't even know their new last name. He looks at the visitor and asks a heartbreaking question. Is he still alive? The visitor pulls up a picture on his phone. It's a man with a famously bald head and a booming laugh that can fill any room. A man who happens to be one of the wealthiest and most powerful people on the planet. For the first time in 45 years, Ted Jorgensen is looking at his biological son, Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO of Amazon.com. And until that exact moment, he had absolutely no idea. This story, which opens a quiet window into a hidden part of Jeff Bezos' life, is where our journey begins today. We're diving into Brad Stone's remarkable book, The Everything Store, a book that has sold millions of copies and has been translated into dozens of languages. It is the definitive story of how a gifted, fiercely driven boy from Texas built a global empire that changed the way we live. But this isn't just a story about business. By the time we're done today, I promise you'll understand something far more profound, the mindset of a true visionary. You will see how one person's relentless focus, long-term thinking, and willingness to be misunderstood can turn a simple idea, selling books online, into a force that reshapes entire industries. This is the story of Amazon, yes, but it's also a lesson in how the future is built, one bold, audacious step at a time. Book summary. Our story really starts not in a garage, but on the 40th floor of a skyscraper in New York City in the early 1990s. This was the headquarters of a very unusual Wall Street firm called D.E. Shaw & Co. It wasn't your typical investment bank filled with finance majors. David Shaw, a former computer science professor, recruited scientists and mathematicians, people with brilliant minds who could use complex algorithms to find hidden patterns in the financial markets. It was a house of quants, and one of its brightest stars was a young senior vice president named Jeff Bezos. Bezos was already known for his intense intellect and a laugh so loud and startling it could stop conversations in their tracks. He was disciplined, always carrying a notebook to jot down ideas. And he was deeply analytical about everything, even his social life. He famously took ballroom dancing classes, calculating that it would increase his exposure to what he called N+ women. This was a man who looked at the world as a series of problems to be solved. In 1994, Bezos came across a staggering statistic. He read that usage of this new thing called the World Wide Web was growing at 2,300% a year. The number, as he would later admit, was based on a math error, but the underlying truth was undeniable. Something revolutionary was happening. He and David Shaw began brainstorming business ideas that could ride this incredible wave. They talked about a financial services company, an online advertising service, and another, grander idea they called the Everything Store. An online marketplace that could sell nearly every product in the world, directly to customers. Bezos knew that a true everything store was too ambitious to start with. He needed a foothold. He made a list of 20 possible product categories and analyzed each one. Books, he realized, were the perfect starting point. They were commodities. A copy of a book in one store is identical to the same copy in another. There were millions of titles in print, far more than any physical bookstore could ever stock. And, crucially, there were 2 major distributors, so he wouldn't have to deal with thousands of individual publishers. He could build a store online that offered a selection that simply couldn't exist in the physical world. The idea took hold of him. It was an obsession. But he knew that if he built this business inside D.E. Shaw, it would never truly be his. He had to go out on his own. This led to one of the most famous decisions in modern business history. To decide whether to leave his secure, high-paying job, Bezos created what he called the regret minimization framework. It's a simple but profound mental model. He projected himself forward to the age of 80 and looked back on his life. He asked himself, in that quiet moment of reflection, which path will I regret more, leaving my job and my Wall Street bonus, or missing out on this thing called the internet that I believe is going to be a revolution? As he later explained, I knew that I might sincerely regret not having participated in this thing called the internet. When I thought about it that way, it was an incredibly easy decision. So, at the age of 30, Jeff Bezos told his boss he was quitting. He called his parents, Mike and Jackie, who were living in Colombia at the time. Their reaction was, understandably, one of shock. "What do you mean, you're going to sell books over the internet?" His mother suggested he try it out at night or on the weekends, as a hobby. But Bezos knew he had to move fast. "Things are changing fast," he told her. "I need to move quickly." Soon after, Jeff and his wife, Mackenzie Tuttle, a brilliant writer whom he had met at D.E. Shaw, packed up their lives. They flew to Texas, borrowed a 1988 Chevy Blazer from his father, and began driving northwest. Mackenzie drove while Jeff sat in the passenger seat, tapping out a business plan and revenue projections on a laptop, numbers that would turn out to be wildly, laughably inaccurate. They were writing their own entrepreneurial origin story, a journey into the unknown, fueled by a powerful idea and a framework for avoiding regret. They settled in Seattle, a city chosen for its pool of tech talent, and, more strategically, for Washington's relatively small population, which meant they would only have to collect sales tax from a small percentage of their customers. They rented a 3-bedroom house in the suburb of Bellevue, and in the converted garage, Amazon was born. Bezos built the first desks himself, using $60 blonde wood doors from Home Depot, a symbol of the company's founding principle of frugality that would become legendary. His first employee was a quiet, brilliant programmer named Shel Caffin, a veteran of the early internet who shared Bezos's vision for making information universally accessible. Mackenzie became the company's first accountant, handling the finances and writing the checks. For meetings, they would often walk to a nearby Barnes & Noble, an irony that was not lost on any of them. Their first challenge was the name. The company was initially called Cadabra Incorporated, as in abracadabra. But Bezos's first lawyer pointed out that over the phone, it sounded too much like cadaver. They brainstormed other names. One he strongly considered was Relentless.com. Friends told him it sounded a bit sinister, but something about it captivated him. He registered the domain in 1994, and he still owns it. If you type Relentless.com into your browser today, it will take you straight to Amazon's homepage. Finally, while poring through the A section of a dictionary, he landed on the word Amazon. Earth's largest river. Earth's largest bookstore. It was perfect. It captured the scale of his ambition. The first version of the Amazon.com website went live on July 16, 1995. It was primitive, mostly text, with a simple blue logo of a river snaking through a giant A. When an order came in, a bell would ring on the office computers, and everyone would gather around to see if they knew the customer. At first, they held no inventory. When a customer bought a book, Amazon would order it from a distributor. It would arrive a few days later, and then they would pack it on the floor of the basement and ship it out. One of their first major hurdles was that the distributors required them to order 10 books at a time. Amazon didn't have that kind of sales volume yet. So, they found a loophole. As Bezos loved to tell it, their systems were programmed in such a way that you didn't have to receive 10 books, you only had to order 10 books. They found an obscure book about lichens that was always out of stock and would order 1 book they needed and 9 copies of the lichen book. The distributor would ship the book they needed with a note saying, "Sorry, but we're out of the lichen book." It was classic startup ingenuity. From the very beginning, Bezos understood that to succeed, Amazon had to be more than just a store. It had to be a place for discovery. He was obsessed with the idea of customer reviews. He believed that if Amazon had more user-generated reviews than any other site, it would give them a huge advantage. When a publisher wrote him an angry letter, saying that his business was to sell books, not trash them, Bezos saw it differently. "We don't make money when we sell things," he would later say. "We make money when we help customers make purchase decisions." Just a week after the official launch, a small website called Yahoo, run by 2 Stanford graduate students, asked if they could feature Amazon on their list of cool new things on the web. At the time, Yahoo was one of the most visited sites online. The small Amazon team debated whether they were ready for the wave of new business. They decided to go for it. Within a month, they had sold books to people in all 50 states and 45 countries. The bell in the office started ringing so often they had to turn it off. The rocket had launched. As orders surged, Bezos knew he couldn't fund the company on his parents' life savings forever. His parents, Jackie and Mike, had invested over $245,000, with Bezos warning them there was a 70% chance they would lose it all. He set out to raise $1 million from angel investors, valuing his fledgling company at an audacious $6 million. He told every potential investor the same thing he told his parents: the company had a 70% chance of failing. Many turned him down. But he found about 20 investors who saw what he saw: a man with an unshakable conviction about the future of the Internet. He predicted a future where the Internet would be high speed, not dial-up, and that the infinite shelf space of the web would enable the fulfillment of that grand vision of the everything store. With fresh capital, Amazon grew at a frenetic pace. And Bezos began to instill the unique and demanding culture that defines the company to this day. He was determined to hire only the best, what he called players. For years, he interviewed every single job candidate himself, and even asked them for their SAT scores. "Every time we hire someone," he would say, "he or she should raise the bar for the next hire, so that the overall talent pool is always improving." This became a core Jeffism, a mantra repeated inside the company for decades. The work culture was intense. The new motto became "Get Big Fast." Bezos believed that the company that got the lead on the Internet would likely keep it. This meant everyone had to work relentlessly. One early engineer, Christopher Smith, worked so tirelessly over an 8-month span that he completely forgot about his car. He only discovered its fate when he opened a pile of mail and found parking tickets, a towing notice, and finally, a letter informing him that the car had been sold at auction. "Life just stopped," he recalled. "You were stuck in amber." But inside that amber was frenetic activity. In May 1997, Amazon went public, raising $54 million. But the real test was just around the corner. Barnes & Noble, the giant of the book world, launched its own website and sued Amazon, claiming it was falsely advertising itself as the Earth's largest bookstore. Analysts predicted Amazon would be crushed. The CEO of Forrester Research famously called the company Amazon.toast. Bezos addressed his employees, telling them not to worry about their competitors. "Look," he said, "you should wake up worried, terrified every morning. But don't be worried about our competitors because they're never going to send us any money anyway. Let's be worried about our customers and stay heads down focused. It was another defining moment. Amazon's obsession would be with its customers, not its rivals. And in the end, Bezos was right. Barnes & Noble struggled to adapt its massive physical distribution network to the very different challenge of shipping small, individual orders to countless destinations. For Amazon, that was just daily business. The dot-com bubble of the late 1990s was a period of wild, irrational exuberance. Capital was cheap, and opportunities seemed limitless. And no one placed bigger, bolder bets on the internet than Jeff Bezos. Between 1998 and 2000, Amazon raised a breathtaking $2.2 billion and went on an epic spending spree. It opened 5 new, state-of-the-art distribution centers. It expanded into music, movies, toys, and electronics. It invested in a slew of other dot-coms, like Pets.com and Cosmo.com, almost all of which would soon go up in flames. The company's motto was still "Get big fast," but now it was fueled by billions of dollars and a skyrocketing stock price. Employees lived under Bezos's frugal rules, paying for their own parking and flying coach, while watching him push more and more chips onto the table. One engineer at the time said, "What we are doing here is building a giant rocket ship, and we're going to light the fuse. Then it's either going to go to the moon or leave a giant smoking crater in the ground." The 1999 holiday season was a near disaster. The company was drowning in orders it couldn't fulfill. An all-hands-on-deck emergency was declared, and every corporate employee, from engineers to executives, took graveyard shifts in the distribution centers, packing boxes through the night. Bezos held contests to see who could pick orders off the shelves the fastest. They barely survived, but he vowed that Amazon would never again have a shortage of capacity to meet customer demand. In December of that year, Jeff Bezos was named Time magazine's Person of the Year, the king of cybercommerce. Amazon seemed unstoppable. Then, in the spring of 2000, the rocket ship's engine sputtered. The dot-com bubble burst. The Nasdaq stock market began a downward spiral, and the faith that had propped up so many unprofitable internet companies evaporated overnight. Suddenly, Amazon's massive spending and widening losses were no longer seen as bold investments in the future. They were seen as reckless. In June 2000, a young, unknown bond analyst at Lehman Brothers named Ravi Surya published a scathing report on Amazon. He called the company's credit extremely weak and deteriorating and made a prediction that sent shockwaves through the financial world. "We believe that the company will run out of cash within the next 4 quarters. The headlines were sensational. The New York Post declared, "Analyst finally tells the truth about dot-coms." Amazon's stock, which had already been falling, plummeted another 20%. Bezos publicly called the report pure unadulterated hogwash. But behind the scenes, the company was in crisis mode. The real danger was not that Surya was right, but that his prediction could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If suppliers got spooked and demanded immediate payment, or if customers lost faith, Amazon's cash flow could dry up. The company's mantra had to change. "Get big fast" was replaced with a new one: "Get our house in order." The new watchwords were discipline, efficiency, and eliminating waste. But inside the company, the cratering stock price was devastating. Employees who had joined recently held stock options that were now completely worthless. Many top executives, exhausted and disillusioned, left the company. Through it all, Bezos never showed a hint of anxiety. "I have never seen anyone so calm in the eye of a storm," one senior vice president recalled. Ice water runs through his veins. He scrawled on a whiteboard in his office, "I am not my stock price," and told everyone to ignore the pessimism. He quoted the legendary investor Benjamin Graham, "In the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long run, it's a weighing machine. If Amazon stayed focused on the customer, he declared, the company would be fine. This period of crisis forged the Amazon we know today. Bezos became obsessed with efficiency. He hired Jeff Wilke, a brilliant operations executive who brought the rigorous, process-driven philosophy of Six Sigma from his time at Allied Signal. Wilke transformed Amazon's chaotic warehouses into hyper-efficient fulfillment centers. They rewrote the software, introduced new algorithms to optimize every step of the process, and began to master the complex physics of their own logistics network. At the same time, Bezos was rethinking the very structure of the company. He grew to hate what he called the institutional no, the tendency of large organizations to resist new ideas. He declared that communication is a sign of dysfunction, arguing that teams should be small and independent enough that they didn't need to waste time coordinating with each other. This led to the creation of his famous two pizza teams, autonomous groups small enough that they could be fed with two pizzas. These teams would compete with each other, sometimes duplicate efforts, but they would move fast and innovate. And it was during this time of crisis that one of Amazon's most powerful ideas was born. The early attempts to compete with eBay through auctions had failed. But Bezos realized that Amazon had something eBay didn't: the Internet's most authoritative product catalog. One weekend, at a meeting in the basement of his home, he and his team had a breakthrough. Instead of trying to create a separate destination for third-party sellers, they should invite them to list their products right alongside Amazon's own, on the very same product pages that customers were already visiting. This new initiative, called Marketplace, was launched in November 2000. It was a brilliant, counterintuitive move. Internally, Amazon's own retail managers were horrified. They could now lose a sale to a competitor on their own product page. Publishers and authors protested that it would undermine the sale of new books by placing used books right next to them. Bezos didn't care. It offered more choice to customers, and that was all that mattered. As one executive at the time said, it was Jeff against the world. Marketplace was the first step in transforming Amazon into a platform. The next and most revolutionary step came from an unlikely source: the company's own internal dysfunction. By the early 2000s, Amazon's technical infrastructure was a sprawling mess. The code was clunky and held together by what one executive called duct tape and WD-40 engineering. It was a massive bottleneck. Project teams had to beg for access to the company's computer resources, and innovation was slowing down. Bezos exploded. He realized that if Amazon wanted its own developers to be able to innovate freely, it needed to break down its infrastructure into a set of simple, fundamental building blocks, or primitives, as he called them, inspired by a book on artificial intelligence. Things like storage, computing power, and databases should be treated as services that any developer could access on demand. And then came the big leap. If Amazon was building these services for its own internal use, why not offer them to the outside world as well? This was the birth of Amazon Web Services, or AWS. It was a completely new business, unrelated to retail, born from the company's own struggle to conquer chaos. It started with a storage service called S3 in 2006, followed by a computing service called EC2, which allowed developers to run their own programs on Amazon's computers. Bezos insisted on pricing these services like a utility, with shockingly low rates, even if it meant losing money for a long time. He believed that high profit margins just attracted competition, while low margins attracted customers. AWS was a game changer. It ushered in the age of cloud computing. Startups no longer needed to spend millions on their own servers. They could rent computing power from Amazon, paying only for what they used. It fueled the next wave of internet innovation, powering companies like Pinterest, Instagram, and Netflix. And it finally proved to the world what Bezos had been claiming for years: Amazon was not just a retailer. It was a technology company. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in 2004. Apple had completely dominated the music business with the iPod and iTunes, and Bezos was terrified that the same thing would happen to books. "It is far better to cannibalize yourself than have someone else do it," became the new mantra. He knew Amazon had to create its own e-reading device, even if it meant disrupting its own successful physical book business. Again, there was fierce internal resistance. His top executives, including Jeff Wilke, argued that building hardware was expensive, risky, and far outside the company's expertise. Bezos dismissed their objections. He was determined to control the entire customer experience, from the device to the digital bookstore. He put one of his most trusted lieutenants, Steve Kessel, in charge of the top secret project, telling him, "Your job is to kill your own business. I want you to proceed as if your goal is to put everyone selling physical books out of a job." The project, codenamed Fiona, was developed in a secretive Silicon Valley lab called Lab 126. The name was a subtle nod to Bezos's vision. The 1 stands for A and the 26 for Z. From A to Z. The everything store. The device had to be simple enough for a grandmother to use, and Bezos insisted on a feature that everyone thought was insane: free, built-in wireless connectivity so customers could download books from anywhere, without ever having to connect to a computer. He called it WhisperNet. But the biggest battle was with the book publishers. Bezos was determined to have 100,000 titles available at launch, including 90% of the New York Times bestsellers. Getting them on board was a brutal process of cajoling, pressuring, and sometimes threatening. And he made one more audacious decision, one that he kept secret from the publishers until the very end. New releases and bestsellers would be priced at a flat $9.99. Amazon would lose money on every one of those sales, but Bezos believed it was a necessary investment to change customer behavior and accelerate the adoption of digital reading. The first Kindle was unveiled on November 19, 2007. It was clunky and far from beautiful, but it was revolutionary. It sold out in 5.5 hours. Amazon had done what Sony and so many others had failed to do. It had created an e-reader that people actually wanted to use. It was a seamless, frictionless experience. And the $9.99 price point, as feared, sent shockwaves through the publishing industry, setting the stage for years of conflict. In the years that followed, Amazon's flywheel began to spin with unstoppable momentum. A new service, Amazon Prime, offered free 2-day shipping for a flat annual fee of $79. It was another money-losing proposition on paper, but Bezos knew it would change customer psychology. It was really about changing people's mentalities so they wouldn't shop anywhere else, one executive recalled. And it worked. Prime members, on average, doubled their spending on the site. Now, with all the pieces in place, a massive selection, a world-class logistics network, a dominant position in cloud computing, and a revolutionary e-reader, Amazon began to wield its power with a ruthlessness that startled even its own employees. The company became what one executive called a cheetah, systematically pursuing sickly gazelles, smaller competitors that it could either acquire or crush. The stories became legendary. Zappos, the online shoe retailer, was driven into selling to Amazon after a brutal price war and the launch of a competing site, Endless.com. Quidsi, the parent company of Diapers.com, was subjected to an even more aggressive assault. Amazon launched Amazon Mom, a program offering steep discounts on diapers that was designed to bleed the startup dry. The day Amazon announced the program, Quidsi's founders were, by no accident, sitting in a meeting in Amazon's own offices, unaware of what was happening. Quidsi sold to Amazon soon after for $540 million. Amazon's power was felt not just by its competitors, but by its suppliers. It demanded better terms, steeper discounts, and more co-op marketing dollars. It used its sophisticated pricing bots to scour the web and automatically match the lowest price anywhere, often violating the minimum advertised price policies of brands like Wusthof, the German knife maker, and Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company. The message was clear. If you wanted access to Amazon's 200 million customers, you had to play by Amazon's rules. The company that started in a garage was now a global empire, an everything store that was also an everything company. It was a publisher, a movie studio, a hardware manufacturer, and a utility for the internet. It was both a missionary, relentlessly focused on its customers, and a mercenary, willing to torch the landscape to emerge the winner. And at the center of it all was Jeff Bezos, the man with the booming laugh and the unwavering conviction. The man who, decades ago, looked into the future and decided he would rather risk failure than live with the regret of not trying. The man who built his empire on a single, powerful belief that in the age of the internet, the company that started with the customer and worked backward would, in the end, win. Commentary. As we step back and look at the incredible story of Amazon, it's easy to get lost in the sheer scale of it all, the billions of dollars, the millions of products, the global reach. But I think the real power of Brad Stone's book lies in the simple, fundamental lessons that are woven throughout this epic tale. And there are a few that I believe are especially important for you to hold on to. First, is the power of long-term thinking. This is, without a doubt, the central pillar of Jeff Bezos' entire philosophy. In a world that is obsessed with quarterly earnings and immediate results, he has always played a different game. He built Amazon not for next month or next year, but for the next decade. When he launched the Kindle and sold bestsellers for $9.99, he was willing to lose money on every single sale because he wasn't trying to make a profit on that book. He was trying to build a new behavior, a new market, a new future. He was willing to be misunderstood by Wall Street for years because he had a clarity of vision that extended far beyond the horizon of most other leaders. Think about that in your own life. It's so easy to get caught up in the immediate pressures, the test next week, the social drama of the weekend. But what if you applied that regret minimization framework? What if you started making decisions based on who you want to be in 10 years, not just who you are today? That shift in perspective, that willingness to plant seeds for a tree you won't sit under for a long time, is one of the most powerful forces for creating a meaningful life. The second lesson is the true meaning of customer obsession. This phrase gets thrown around a lot in business, but at Amazon, it's not a slogan, it's a religion. Every major innovation at Amazon, one-click ordering, customer reviews, Prime, the Kindle, AWS, was born from a relentless focus on removing friction and adding value for the customer. Bezos famously leaves an empty chair in some meetings to represent the customer, the most important person in the room. He reads customer complaint emails and forwards them to his executives with a single, terrifying question mark, setting off internal fire drills. This isn't just about good service, it's about a deep, empathetic understanding of what people want before they even know they want it. It's about starting with their needs and working backward to invent a solution. This is a mindset you can apply to anything, whether you're building a company, working on a school project, or just trying to be a better friend. Start with the other person. What do they need? How can you serve them? That is the path to creating real value in the world. And finally, this story is a powerful, and sometimes uncomfortable, look at the dual nature of great ambition. Bezos often talks about wanting Amazon to be a missionary company, not a mercenary one. Missionaries are trying to make the world a better place. Mercenaries are just out for money and power. And in many ways, Amazon is a missionary. It has genuinely empowered customers with lower prices, greater selection, and incredible convenience. But as the stories of its competitors and suppliers show, it can also be a ruthless mercenary, willing to use its immense power to crush anyone who stands in its way. The book doesn't give us an easy answer to whether Amazon is good or evil, and I think that's the point. The world is rarely that simple. Great achievements often require a level of drive and intensity that can be both creative and destructive. The story of Jeff Bezos is a reminder that building something truly revolutionary requires an almost inhuman level of conviction, a willingness to be the villain in someone else's story, and an unwavering belief that your vision for the future is the right one. So, what can you do with all of this today? Here are a few simple thoughts. First, the next time you face a big decision, try the regret minimization framework. Project yourself to the end of your life and ask which path will leave you with the fewest regrets. It's a simple thought experiment that can bring incredible clarity. Second, practice working backward. Before you start any new project, take a few minutes to write a press release for it, just like they do at Amazon. Announce the finished product to the world. What problem does it solve? What are its benefits? This simple act forces you to start with the end user in mind, and it will make everything you create more focused and impactful. And third, think about your own personal flywheel. What are the 2 or 3 things that, when you do them consistently, create a virtuous cycle of growth in your life? Maybe it's exercise, which gives you more energy, which makes you more productive, which gives you more time for exercise. Whatever it is, identify it, and then focus your energy on pushing that wheel. That was a summary of The Everything Store by Brad Stone. We've journeyed through the highlights today, but I want to be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you explore the territory yourself. The true magic of a book like this happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple turn of phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is a starting point, designed to help you decide if this story is worth your time and attention. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or lit a fire in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning the history of a company, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see the world and your own potential within it. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you something to think about, please do me a small favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.